Before we get into today's video, we want to say a big thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Surfshark is an excellent VPN service that makes online privacy protection easy and attainable. Surfshark makes sure that no one can see what you're doing online by encrypting all internet traffic to and from your devices. In addition to that, Surfshark blocks ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts. One of the best parts about Surfshark that you don't get with other VPN services is that you can use it on as many devices as you want simultaneously. So why should you get Surfshark? Well, did you know that some online businesses charge different prices to different customers? Their prices can fluctuate depending on what country you're in and even what device you're using when you visit their website. By using Surfshark, you can avoid price discrimination when you're buying flights, renting vehicles, booking accommodations, and when making financial transactions on other websites. Another great aspect of Surfshark involves online streaming. Have you ever gone to watch a movie or TV series on a streaming platform like Netflix only to find out that it isn't available in your region? With Surfshark, you can choose any country to stream from without ever leaving your home. Surfshark is also incredibly affordable, and for a limited time, they are offering a fantastic deal to criminally listed viewers. To get 83% off and an extra month for free, click on the link in the description or go to surfshark.deal/listed and use my promo code LISTED. So please help support Criminally Listed and protect your privacy online by getting Surfshark today. Number 3. Kimberly Harbour. In the fall of 1964, Russell Harbour was working as a computer specialist. He lived in the Back Bay neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts with his wife, Ernestine. The couple was childless. Russell had befriended several people who lived on the streets. When these people needed help, they sought him out. In the fall of 1964, 2 sex workers showed up on his doorstep with a 3-month-old baby girl. The baby was the daughter of one of their friends who was addicted to drugs. The baby was not in good shape. She was malnourished and there were burn marks on her body. Russell and Ernestine took the baby in, and eventually, with the permission of the mother, they adopted her. They named her Kimberly Ray Harbour. Kimberly was smart and often achieved A's in school. But she also had serious behavioral problems. At the age of 5, she started seeing a therapist and continued to do so for the next dozen years. When she was 10 years old, her adopted parents got divorced. Kimberly's behavior got worse after the divorce. Eventually, she was sent to a Catholic boarding school, but she did not stay there for very long. Despite achieving good marks in school, Kimberly dropped out of school when she was 18 years old. When she was 19, she gave birth to a daughter. Sometime after her birth, Kimberly became addicted to cocaine and crack. She eventually gave custody of her daughter to her adopted mother, Ernestine. Kimberly worked in some offices, but she never held a job for very long because of her addictions. She eventually turned to sex work to pay for her addictions. On Halloween night 1990, David Sampson, Michael Williams, and Anthony Ayala, who were all 16 years old, were hanging out with Terrence Wade and Ezekiel Hogan, who were both 15, Shay Barnes, who was 17, Carlos Garcia, who was 18, and Corey James, who was the oldest of the bunch at 19. The young men considered themselves a gang, and they called themselves the Franklin Field Pistons. On that Halloween night, they decided to go to a teen center in Dorchester, which is a neighborhood in Boston. Well, when they got to the teen center, they found out that the Halloween party had been canceled. So they went to one of their homes and drank some beers. Then they decided to go out and search the neighborhood for a party. But they could not find a party. What exactly happened next is unclear because of the young men's conflicting stories. One of them said that someone suggested robbing one of the sex workers. Another one said that they were bored, so they decided to kill someone. Nevertheless, they came across 26-year-old Kimberly Harbour, who was walking with her friend, Laura Peterson. The gang of young men attacked the two women. Peterson was struck on the head with a tree branch. They robbed her, but she managed to get away. Kimberly wasn't as fortunate. The young men chased her into a field where they stripped her and took turns sexually assaulting her. Then they beat her with a branch and a beer bottle. Then, using several knives, they cut and stabbed her 132 times. She was also kicked and stomped on. At least one of the young men jumped up and down on her. Kimberly sustained at least 18 serious blunt force trauma injuries. During the attack, Kimberly begged for her life, but the young men ignored her pleas. In the end, they stole her coat and her money. Kimberly only had $1 on her. Kimberly's dead body was found the next morning. All 8 young men were arrested about 2.5 weeks later. The police were told to investigate them because several of the gang members had been bragging about committing the murder. One of the young men, 16-year-old Michael Williams, was offered a plea deal. If he cooperated with the authorities and testified against his friends, then he could be tried as a juvenile. He took the plea deal. The other 7 young men were all tried as adults. In 1992, they were all convicted of murder or manslaughter. Because Smith cooperated with the authorities, he spent just over 2 years in a juvenile detention center. Ezekiel Hogan, who was 15, was sentenced to life plus 20 years. Terrence Wade, who was 16 when Kimberly was killed, was sentenced to 3 concurrent life sentences. Shay Barnes, who was 17 at the time of the murder, was sentenced to 40 to 60 years of prison. Carlos Garcia and Corey James, who were 18 and 19 years old respectively at the time of the murder, were both sentenced to life without parole. Anthony Ayala, who was 16 at the time of the attack, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 2 concurrent life sentences, plus a sentence of 7 to 10 years. Finally, David Sampson, who was 16 at the time of the murder, was sentenced to 18 to 25 years to life with a minimum of 10 years of prison. Number 2. Lisa French. In January 1973, 8-year-old Lisa French moved with her mother and stepfather into a duplex that was located in a working-class neighborhood of Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. In the autumn of that year, her stepfather was in the process of adopting her. After Lisa started school, she made some friends. In October 1973, Lisa was looking forward to going out trick-or-treating with her best friend. That year in Fond du Lac, there were rumors swirling around the city. Someone was supposedly planning on handing out candy with razor blades in it or poison candy. So some adults had planned a Halloween party for children at a vacant lot called the Pumpkin Place. Lisa, who was now 9, was allowed to go out trick-or-treating with her best friend, but they had to stay in the neighborhood. The party was being held a block away from her home, so she was allowed to attend the party. Lisa wanted to dress up as a butterfly, but her mother thought it was too cold for that. So Lisa dressed up as a hobo and set off from her home alone at about 5:45 p.m. Her parents told her that she had to be home by 7 p.m. 7 o'clock came and went, and Lisa did not walk back in the door. So her mother and stepfather started looking for her. They checked the party, but they found out that Lisa did not attend. Then they went to talk to Lisa's best friend, who she was supposed to go trick-or-treating with. But it turned out that her friend had misbehaved and she had not been allowed to go out that night. The police were alerted and a massive search was conducted for the 9-year-old girl. Over 5,000 people joined in on the search. 2 people came forward and said that Lisa had stopped off at their house to trick-or-treat. Other than that, almost no one knew what happened to Lisa. But one person knew exactly what happened to the 9-year-old girl. Gerald Turner was a 24-year-old millwright. He lived with his girlfriend, Arlene Penn, and Penn's daughter. They used to live in the unit that was attached to Lisa's family's unit. Lisa used to talk to Turner quite a bit when they were neighbors. Turner, Penn, and her daughter moved to a home that was about half a block away several months after Lisa and her family moved in. It turned out that Lisa had knocked on their door that night. At the time, Penn and her daughter were out trick-or-treating. They joined up with some friends in the neighborhood. After hitting up a few houses, they went to the party at the Pumpkin Place. Penn and her daughter returned home at about 7:15 p.m. Penn, her daughter, and Turner were supposed to go to Penn's mother's home that night. Turner met Penn and her daughter at the door of their home and told them he wasn't feeling well. He told Penn that he was not going to be able to go to her mother's home, and he suggested that she ask one of her friends to drive her and her daughter to her mother's home. Penn and her daughter did get a ride, but as they were driving over to Penn's mother's home, Penn realized that her mother wasn't there and she would not be home for at least another 45 minutes. So she and her daughter got dropped off at home. When they got inside, Turner was wearing the clothes he wore to work. Penn sat on the couch and watched TV. Turner joined her, but he went into the master bedroom a couple times to lie down because he said he wasn't feeling well. Penn thought that Turner was faking his illness because he did not want to go to her mother's home. But she did not notice anything else unusual about him that night. While she was home, Penn never went into the master bedroom or the bathroom that was adjacent to it. At about 8:45 p.m., Penn's sister picked her and her daughter up. They went to Penn's mother's home and then they came home at around 11:30 p.m. When they got home, Turner was in a bathrobe. Penn also noticed that the bedspread from their bed was on the laundry room floor. Turner said that he had gotten sick on the bedspread. But Penn washed the bedspread and she did not notice anything on it. Penn and Turner went to bed not long after Penn got home. What Penn didn't know was that while she was out trick-or-treating with her daughter, Lisa French came to their home. Turner lured her into the master bedroom. Turner sexually assaulted her on the bed that he shared with Penn. But at some point, he noticed that Lisa wasn't breathing. He tried to revive her, but then Penn and her daughter came home. Turner sent them away, and then he moved the body into the bathroom that was adjacent to the main bedroom. Not long afterward, Penn and her daughter came back home after Penn realized that her mother wasn't home. While they were home, Turner kept the body hidden in the bathroom. When Penn and her daughter left again, he collected Lisa's costume and he put it into a plastic bag. He then put her body into a garbage bag. He then loaded the 2 bags into his car. He drove 4 miles outside of the city to a wooded area that bordered on a farmer's field. It was there that he dumped the 2 bags. Lisa's body was found by a farmer 3 days after she went missing. The medical examiner determined that she had been smothered to death. Over the next several months, Gerald Turner was periodically questioned by the police. Then on August 8, 1974, about 9 months after the murder, Turner confessed to killing Lisa. He signed the confession and he initialed it in 24 different places. Gerald Turner went to trial in January 1975 and he pleaded not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity. He claimed that the confession was coerced and none of it was in his own words. He said he confessed and then signed and initialed the confession because he was tired of the police hassling him. Turner's lawyer also argued that there was no concrete physical evidence, like fingerprints, that connected Turner to the crime. Then the prosecution had a forensic expert testify. He said that hairs that were found on Lisa's costume were similar to Arlene Penn's hair. But the expert also admitted that it could have been someone else's hair. The jury ended up deliberating for 8 hours, and they found Gerald Turner guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 38.5 years in prison. In prison, Turner was a model prisoner. However, he refused psychological treatment and he did not show any remorse for his crime. Nevertheless, he got time shaved off his sentence for good behavior. He was released from prison in October 1992 after serving 17 years in prison. But then, a year later, the Court of Appeals ruled that there was a miscalculation and Turner had been released 6 years too early. So he was sent back to prison for another 6 years. He was released again in 1998. He tried to get a job with Waste Management in Madison, but he wasn't hired because of his criminal record. He sued Waste Management of Madison, and in 1999, he won a settlement of an undisclosed amount. In early 2003, Turner was living in a halfway house in Madison, Wisconsin. His room was searched. On a hard drive, authorities found hundreds of pornographic images and videos. They also found pornographic DVDs, videotapes, and magazines. None of the images or videos were illegal, but they were a violation of Turner's parole. In April 2003, he was ordered to return to prison to serve out the rest of his sentence, which was 15 years. In February 2018, Turner finished his entire sentence and he was supposed to be released from prison. But instead of being released, he was placed in a treatment center, and at the time of this video, he is still being held there. The Department of Justice wants Turner to be labeled a sexually violent person, and they want to keep him incarcerated. The Court of Appeals is currently considering the ruling that could keep him incarcerated. Gerald Turner, who is nicknamed the Halloween Killer, forever changed Wisconsin. In 1994, a new law, which was nicknamed the Gerald Turner Law, was passed. The law states that if an inmate is deemed to be a sexually violent person because of a mental disorder before they leave prison, at the end of their sentence, they can be placed in a mental health facility until they are no longer considered a danger. Then secondly, the city of Fond du Lac changed the way children trick-or-treat. As of 2018, 45 years after Lisa French was killed, children are only allowed to trick-or-treat from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. on the Sunday before Halloween. Number 1. Doreen Erbert. The fall of 1984 was an exciting time for the Erbert family. Doreen and Charles Erbert were expecting their second child. Doreen, who was 31, and Charles already had one daughter, Deanna, who was 4 years old. Charles had his own carpet business, and Doreen worked as a secretary for the business. They lived in a nice neighborhood in San Jose, California. On Halloween night 1984, Charles and Doreen took Deanna out trick-or-treating around their block, and then they returned home. Just after 9 p.m., Charles started pounding on the door of their neighbor's home. He was covered in blood. He told the neighbor that Doreen had been attacked and he couldn't find Deanna. Charles then ran back to his home. The neighbor called 911 and first responders rushed to the Herberts' home. They found Doreen in the front doorway, lying in a pool of blood. It was clear that she had been hacked and slashed with a large knife, possibly a machete. Charles was standing in the living room with Deanna. It turned out that Deanna had been hiding in the house and she was unharmed. Doreen was placed in an ambulance, but sadly, she did not survive the trip to the hospital. Her unborn son did not survive the attack either. Charles was immediately arrested. A murder victim's romantic partner or ex-partner is usually the prime suspect, and Charles was covered in Doreen's blood. He was also acting erratically and he smelled of alcohol. The police thought that he might have gone drunk, snapped, and killed Doreen. But at the police station, Charles was able to give an alibi. He said he left their home at about 8:45 to get some more candy. On the way home, he stopped in at a party that was being hosted by one of his neighbors. He said he stayed for a drink and then he came home and found his wife lying in a pool of blood. The police then talked to 4-year-old Deanna, who was at home during the attack. Deanna said that she and her mom heard someone knock at the door. They thought it was a trick-or-treater, so they opened the door together. But it wasn't a trick-or-treater, it He was a grown man wearing a big bad wolf mask, and he was holding a large knife. Deanna said that her mother told her to hide, and she ran and hid behind a couch. Then the man attacked her mother. After he was done, he looked through the house. But when he couldn't find anyone else, he left. Outside the Erbert's house, the police found a rubber mask of the big bad wolf. To the police, the discovery of the mask made it seem even less likely that Charles committed the murder. Because why would he disguise himself to kill his own wife? The police also found a trail of blood leading away from the crime scene. The police then talked to one of the Erbert's neighbors. They found out that Charles was Doreen's second husband. She had been married to another man named William Dennis, who went by his middle name, Michael. Michael and Doreen had gotten divorced 6 years earlier in 1978. Doreen was given custody of their toddler son, Paul Dennis. Not long after the divorce was settled, Charles and Doreen got married. In 1979, Doreen gave birth to Deanna. In February 1980, more than 4.5 years before the murder, 3-year-old Paul was playing in their backyard. Doreen took her eyes off him for a few minutes, and he went into the pool. Tragically, Paul drowned. Michael Dennis was understandably devastated by the loss of his son. He was also incredibly angry, and he blamed Doreen for Paul's death. Michael sued Charles and Doreen for negligence. The jury concluded that it was a tragic accident and no one did anything negligent. The outcome of the lawsuit only seemed to make Michael more bitter. The police looked up Michael's address and they realized he lived about a mile away from the Erberts' home. A few hours after the murder, several officers went to Michael's house. They saw that someone was home, but when they rang the doorbell and knocked on the door, no one answered. After a few minutes, Michael opened the door and let the officers in. They noticed that he had a large, fresh cut on 4 of his fingers on his right hand. They looked around and they found evidence that Michael had recently tried to give himself first aid. They continued to look around the house and they found more drops of blood. They also found fresh blood in his truck. The blood was enough to get a search warrant for the rest of the property. The property was searched and a sheath from a machete was found. A receipt from a local hardware store for the machete was also found, but the machete itself was missing. The machete has never been found. The police found something very odd in the garage. There were 2 hand-constructed wooden coffin-like boxes that could be locked. They also found what appeared to be homemade body bags. Finally, there were some anchors and a map of San Francisco Bay. The police thought that Michael had been plotting his revenge for the death of his son Paul for some time. They thought he was planning on kidnapping Doreen and Charles, forcing them into the coffins, and then dumping them into the San Francisco Bay so that they would drown, just like his son. After his property was searched, a detective talked to a female friend of Michael's. She told the detective that the Halloween the year before, she went to a costume party with Michael. She said that Michael wore a rubber mask of the big bad wolf. She also had photos of him wearing the mask. It turned out that was the same mask that was found at the crime scene. Michael was arrested and charged with the murder of Doreen and her unborn son. Michael went to trial in August 1988, nearly 4 years after the murder. He was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Doreen and the second-degree murder of her unborn son. In September 1988, Michael Dennis was sentenced to death. Over 30 years later, he is still on death row in San Quentin prison, and no execution date has been set. Thanks a lot for watching today's video. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. Please check out criminallist.com where you can suggest cases, buy merch, and find out about an exclusive podcast. We're also on Facebook. You can find us at facebook.com/criminallylisted. But that is all for today. Thanks again for watching.